to 37th and the World, the flagship podcast of the Georgetown Journal of International Affairs. I'm Onwin Williams, and today we are joined by Carla Brown, the acting president of the National Peace Corps Association. We are so excited to have her with us today. So, first off, I would like to kind of highlight her work leading the National Peace Corps Association, and today we'll be discussing the necessity of humanitarian aid and volunteerism, as well as some of her personal experience and volunteer work over time. Yeah. So, first off, could you please explain kind of what your work focuses on and what you've been working on in recent months?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me and having me on the podcast. At the National Peace Corps Association, as you said, I'm the current president and CEO. And the National Peace Corps Association is, in fact, the alumni association for the returned Peace Corps volunteer community. For those who do not know, the Peace Corps a- is a agency. It's a government agency that sends Americans all over the world right now to over 60 countries to serve and to do volunteer work for 2 years. We actually represent, we're a separate organization, and we represent people who have already served, and then they come back to the U.S. So that's the community we represent. I actually served in the Comoro Islands. They're between Madagascar and Mozambique. And I taught English as a second language over there. So right now, what do I do at the Alumni Association? In fact, my primary goal right now is to increase the visibility about the Peace Corps, and for people to know why serving is so valuable. It's enjoyable. What you gain from becoming a Peace Corps volunteer, how it impacts your life after you've returned home, and to really bring a voice about volunteerism and the Peace Corps specifically as a national service entity to the broader American community.
That's lovely. So, what personally led you to the Peace Corps, and then after that to the National Peace Corps Association?
So I'm actually was always a very curious person and was wanted to know, how other people lived and just the world, the broader world. So the Peace Corps was my way of doing that. They provided solid benefits, give you the support you need in terms of finding housing, and things of that nature. And it was also a place where I could do something I enjoyed to do, which I wanted to teach. So it gave me a chance to travel in a very safe way, to see the world, meet and experience different cultures. And one of the big things I learned was I was learned a second language. So I'm fluent in French, living overseas is a great way to learn a second language. So that was really important to me to be able to communicate to millions of people with a second language. So what do I do now? The National Peace Corps Association was a natural fit for me because I believed so much in the values of Peace Corps and friendship and culture and exploring and understanding different people, and how people see things differently based on their culture and background. So being in a place where I could share that with people who've had similar experiences, and then to be able to provide that opportunity, or to really um, bring light to the importance of that, really was just an opportunity that I couldn't turn up. Also, I think people don't necessarily know how much the Peace Corps is important to U.S. society, how Peace Corps volunteers are involved in so many different kinds of careers. There are many entrepreneurs who are Peace Corps volunteers, and lawyers and business people, and humanitarian workers, all those kinds of things. It's not just going into international fields, but it kind of exposes people to what they may want to do and what their strengths are. And it dares you to challenge yourself, because often you're kind of faced with something that you've never thought you'd be faced with, and you got to figure out a way, and you do it. And so it makes you more courageous to do that in your career choices.
So, you touch a little bit on courage and kind of exposure to maybe unexpected circumstances and situations. In your experience, and maybe looking personally at your time teaching abroad, what do you think are some of the top skills or lessons that serving in the Peace Corps provides?
I think the first one for me was, as I said, learning a second language. I'm fluent in French. I can translate. I can, just communicate across barriers. And communication is not just word choice, but it's how you put things together. So you learn how to do that so you're heard, which was extremely valuable. I also think it made me creative. It brought tenacity because you wanted to get things done, and you may not have had the tools that you typically would have at home. So you had to figure out different ways to do that. And also, I was adaptable. So I think it there's a flexibility that you gain in the Peace Corps that you may not have had going in because you have to. Um, the other thing I learned was, you can have fun in ways that you didn't realize you would ever be able to have fun. So you enjoy things that maybe you never would have been exposed to. So it just, again, it opens your minds to try new things and to test out new things. And in my case, I just found different ways to just have fun. I mean, sometimes taking a walk was pleasurable, which I would have never thought of doing in the States. But yeah, you just, having conversations with people, it's just different. So you learn that you can enjoy life in different ways. And so it makes it so when you go into new spaces, you're open and to new things and to new people and to new ways of doing things. So
I love that. I think we could all use a couple more ways to have fun, kind of outdoors, just by ourselves and with ourselves. So, yeah.
exactly.
So, kind of, you talked briefly on how a lot of former Peace Corps members will go on to do great things within America, and obviously they are also making an impact internationally. So, in your opinion, why is volunteering and humanitarian aid so important, and how specifically does the Peace Corps kind of embrace and encourage that?
hmm Well, I think what I've learned recently is people don't realize how much they volunteer. So, most people, if they're part of some kind of organized religious group, they're volunteering in their church, mosque, synagogue, because they're participating, they're teaching. If they're somebody who's a new parent, maybe they're teaching a child baseball or basketball, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. We're often volunteering, but we don't necessarily call it or see that. So it's really a part of our actual identity. But Peace Corps allows you to kind of recognize because you're going in to volunteer and you're given that title as a volunteer. Um, but many people are already doing it already. So in coming back to the States, it's very natural when you're a returned Peace Corps volunteer, you get with other volunteers and you start doing things in the community. You're helping in your community, you're feeding it, you're working at soup kitchens, you're doing things for the community because it's a natural part of your identity because you took on the identity of a volunteer. I think what's important is that people need to realize you probably are using some of those talents anyway because you value your community at home. Peace Corps just kind of gives you an organized way to do it in an environment that perhaps you would have not thought about doing it previously. And you bring back skills that you learned overseas or whatever environment you were in that you can then apply at home. So for example, there are volunteers who maybe didn't know they were artistic and now they're helping, design things for kids so that they can, I don't know, at a play group or something they'd be able to use. So that's one thing I think that was important. Humanitarianism, you begin to see the other person. So as a Peace Corps volunteer, you are living in communities and you're having conversations with ordinary people, just community members, and you're talking about, it can be as simple as how do you cook a meal, or you can talk about things that are of more depth. But you see people, and what you learn is that problems that somebody may have, you could possibly have at home. Peace Corps volunteers are very involved in emergencies. So, for example, when there have been things like Hurricane Katrina or recent floods or things of that nature, return volunteers are often ready to step up and help because they see the other person and they know it could happen to them. That's what Peace Corps brings you. It reminds you that each individual is a person, and they're going through their own situation, and we all have positive negatives in life, and you see them and you can be there to help. And return volunteers often want to help because you're part of that community. So,
That's beautiful. I love the idea of seeing the other person as just this entire entity that deserves like all of your help and respect and energy. So, looking at returned Peace Corps volunteers, how does the National Peace Corps Association support these efforts, create a sense of community, and kind of help them keep furthering their impact in their communities?
uh, That's a great question. The National Peace Corps Association, as you can tell from our title, we are national. We have over 150 affiliate groups, and these affiliate groups are organized in four different major ways. One is what we call friends of groups. So they're volunteers who've gone to a particular country, and then when they come home, they work often on behalf of that country in some way. There is also what we call geographic groups, and geographic groups are located in particular locations. They're all over the United States. In Washington, D.C., we have what's called the Return Peace Corps Volunteers of Washington, and they're all over the United States. And then we have what we call affinity groups which are groups of people there's a priority for them, something they're very passionate about. There's like environmental action is a group. There's a group that really wants to support the refugee community, etc. So those types of groups that are really issues based. And then there are also groups that have been linked to federal government, primarily because there are many Peace Corps volunteers were in a particular part of the federal government. And it's through that network that we as the national structure give central themes, I would call, or communicate on behalf of that. One of the big issues that we do is we advocate on behalf of the Peace Corps agency itself, so that it remains an important structure within our government, make sure that it's continuously funded, highlight the importance and the value that it brings as one of the what we call soft powers. So not involved in military, et cetera, but really so people can see Americans and as an everyday American. That's what Peace Corps volunteers often are, because they're living in communities, and in housing, and having that same level of life as everyone in their community. So we bring to vision and make sure that Peace Corps is visible to the everyday American. For our own community, we continue to encourage them to go to their congressmen and senators to be able to advocate on behalf of Peace Corps. We are also looking at themes that are important to our community and creating community. So we network. We have a national conference every year where people can come to and network, learn about what other volunteers are doing, get support in terms of moving into career paths. So being able to talk to people who are doing something that you're passionate about, to learn how to do it, and that type of thing. We provide workforce. There are members in our group that provide workforce support to help volunteers prepare for their career paths. We also have what are called legacy volunteers, who are volunteers who volunteered in the 60s, like when Peace Corps first started in 65, 64. So they can talk about how much Peace Corps has changed, and keep that history and legacy going. So we do quite a bit in terms of keeping the community together, networking, and making sure that Peace Corps itself as an agency is properly funded. Volunteers have a kind of care they need, the support they need, that type of thing.
Wait, that's wonderful. And then looking just a little bit closer at the support and care that volunteers are getting when they return back home, how do you think that kind of serving in the Peace Corps, gaining this experience abroad, supports people's personal education and even, like you said, networking and work opportunities after their service time?
So the sort of formal things that I'll put it, there are a lot of scholarships. There's a scholarship called the Coverdale Scholarship. Many volunteers are able to get resources through that. Many of the what I call geographic groups have successfully advocated for their states to actually give people in-state tuition options. Maryland has done that. North Dakota has done that, and there are others. So no matter what state you come from, if you go to those states, you get in-state tuition. So those kind of benefits are really important. It also stands makes you stand out on on your applications. So often what'll happen is your application will come across the desk, and I know, at least in my personal experience, it was one of the things when I went for an interview, the person said, "You serve in the Peace Corps, I wanted to know more." So it makes you stand out. It's not something that a lot of people have done. We have 250,000 people who have served, so you are unique when you do that. It's a national service around peace, friendship, and volunteerism, so it's unique in that way. So people are curious about why somebody would choose to leave. So there's also opportunities for some loan forgiveness. So there are a lot of things that individuals can benefit from that perspective. From a job perspective, again, it does make you stand out, but many people, it helps you kind of decide what you actually like and what you don't like. And so when you begin to look at career choices, perhaps, and I know many people have said that they thought they would want to be a teacher, they went in Peace Corps and they found out they wanted to do business or, become entrepreneurs because you have to navigate and do things in ways that perhaps you wouldn't have had the opportunity to do at home. And so you do it overseas or as a Peace Corps volunteer, and you're like, this is really interesting and kind of fun. There are many small businesses, people identified products or things overseas, and then they bring that, they learn about different kinds of ways that government works here so you could bring products back to the States and begin businesses, small businesses. So that has been also something that's quite something you see Peace Corps volunteers do when they find things. So it allows you to I think, make choices or have access to choices that you may not have thought of for yourself. And you don't go into necessarily the standard careers. Some people do, but you can also see things that may not have been in your radar, and you go, "Oh, this might be kind of cool." So I think it creates options.
I definitely like the idea of having that kind of exposure and being fully immersed in a community and not just stopping by, looking around, leaving, but actually gaining very much on the ground experience. So, to kind of wrap us up today, if you were speaking to a younger student, maybe a college kid, who is looking towards their future and thinking about what they might be doing, do you have kind of one message for them, whether or not they should join, what they should look into, or anything like that?
Well, I definitely think they should join. So, that would be yes. I mean, it was life-changing for me. I worked in banking and insurance before joining the Peace Corps, and then I left the Peace Corps and went to graduate school and then started doing public health and international affairs. So it was life-changing for me. Um, I think what somebody needs to really think about, well, to understand, sometimes people think of volunteerism as sacrifice, you know, um, and while there is, of course, an element of sacrifice, there is also a major element of self-discovery and self-discovery in a way. For me, it was fun. Of course, there are moments that it's challenging, things you weren't expecting, um, and those types of things there. But there's also a place of enlightenment, a place where you can find joy, and these are things that, you may only get, like, once in a lifetime. In my case, even leaving the Peace Corps, I traveled for 6 months around the world after finishing. So to have that kind of chunk of time just to, go have fun and, I learned how to do massage and scuba diving and going on, safari. Peace Corps allowed me to see the world in a way that I wouldn't have. And so I think it's an invaluable experience, like, personally, but I also think it lets you understand other people in a way that, you just don't when you don't leave a space that you're used to and things that you've been taught growing up and, part of your own culture. When you separate and you go into another culture, it gives you pause and to understand and empathy for other individuals. So I think everyone should do some type of national service. In my case, I did it under the volunteerism, friendship. That was an important space for me.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for your time today. It was incredible to get this opportunity to speak with you and to hear your insights on the National Peace Corps Association and international volunteerism. For anyone who's listening, if you want to learn more or are inspired to join a Peace Corps mission, please visit peacecorpsconnect.org or peacecorps.gov. President Brown, once again, thank you.
Thank you very much.
This was 37th in the World, the official podcast of the Georgetown Journal of International Affairs. Please be sure to subscribe and leave a comment and rating on whichever streaming platform you use. To support the podcast, you can click the link in this podcast's description that says Support the Show. To read other insightful interviews and articles, please check out gajia.georgetown.edu.